Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z, and we're going to be learning about autism. I myself am on the spectrum, considered a level 1 diagnosis, and I have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry, a doctorate in naturopathic medicine, and I practice functional medicine. Neurotypical people are really ineffective at interpreting these autistic behaviors, and that these social interaction difficulties in autism may be a result of misunderstanding the different communication styles between autistics and neurotypicals, and not inherently an autistic trait, because you probably know that autistic people get along with each other better and understand each other better. So that actually points to it not being necessarily a social deficit, but actually that there is a lack of reciprocity that has a negative consequence to autistic mental health. There's also this theory of mind and lacking it, which we're going to talk about. And an example is being constantly misperceived by the neurotypical majority has been associated with autistics feeling obliged to withdraw from society, camouflage and mask, and feel isolated. So again, this is to say that it may not actually be inherently a social deficit, but actually an oppression that is existing culturally that is causing the distress and isolation and masking and all the other things that happen in our bodies and in health. When stress levels are high, we deplete our micronutrients, we deplete so much of ourselves, and then develop other co-occurring conditions as well. Let's talk about communication differences in autism. We know that there is literal thinking. I have a brother who I would consider as a level 2 autistic. He's undiagnosed. And I was talking to him about how I hadn't found the person, the priest, and we call them a Movi. I was like, I can't find a Movi to marry me because I've been trying to find someone who is available at the time I need for my wedding. And we were in the same conversation, and I was saying, we were talking about the Movi and how there is one. And I write, I have no one to marry me. And he goes, what? Did you guys break up? And I have to respond, I have no Moldy to marry me. And this is just an example of a literal interpretation of language at face value, even when the context is right there. And this happens to me all the time, and so many of us. And just understanding this can be so helpful and supportive for both parties, both autistic and allistic people, where we don't make assumptions or can be more curious or just overall more supportive. So one of the biggest differences in autistic communication versus allistic communication is literal thinking and interpretations. Scripting is helpful for copying something you've seen on TV, something you've seen in movies. For me, it was my books. I scripted and mimicked from the books that I read, and that is what helped me to learn to speak the way I do, because I learned how to speak from reading books, and a lot of autistic people script from other forms of media. And it's basically memorizing and using prepared phrases for social interaction, and it helps to create predictability in social exchanges. And so a lot of people on the spectrum go into situations where they've rehearsed things to say or things to talk about, or just the go-to topics as well. Speaking of things that go-to topics, there is a form of communication that's referred to as info dumping. That's one of my favorite ways to talk. And it's really, really helpful if you know that people on the spectrum, as well as other forms of neurodivergence, communicate and relate through something called info dumping. It's where you share extensive details about either yourself or a topic of passion, like a favorite hobby or subject. And it looks like you're just monologuing, but it's a functional way of expressing that is helping you self-regulate, express excitement, and connect all at the same time while processing what you're saying as you're saying it. So it's like a whole form of communication that is self-developing, and it's inviting others to engage on some kind of shared intellectual level. And a lot of times people think that when a person is info dumping, that they just have to stay quiet or that like they're not allowed to say anything or it's just like they lose, track of what is being talked about because, you could just go on and on. You don't even know it. Like we have different senses of time as well. So actually, it's more about creating a collaborative communication. So this is really, really helpful to know for people who also have co-occurring ADHD is that a lot of times people think you're just interrupting each other when you're speaking, but actually I call it collaborative sharing. Once you understand this verbiage and language, then you can start to communicate needs and accommodations better as well. Another communication difference in autism and autistic people, there's not just within autism as well, is echolalia. And this is where you repeat phrases or words that are helpful for self soothing or self regulation. The best way to describe this that's really relatable is like when you hear music that's very catchy and you call it like an earworm, and there's like maybe that specific part. I think Kendrick Lamar is really good at making music that people experience really fun echolalia with, where they're just like repeating like the same like bim boom 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 ba, boom bam. Just repeating that over and over just feels good. So that's like in terms of experiencing echolalia with music, you can also have internalized echolalia. There's like different forms and different words that describe. So echolalia is actually a form of processing the literal experience happening in that moment. There's also something called selective mutism. This is something I used to experience more as a child and I would say into teenage years and also as an adult. There were days I would go many, many days without speaking because I just couldn't talk. And that has to do with the inability to speak due to anxiety or sensory overload. And it can be mistaken for like a refusal to communicate, but actually usually due to something so incredibly overwhelming happening that you just shut down. So understanding all of what I just shared and will bring us to this next communication difference in autism and relational difference is very, very, very important. It's called external nervous system feedback, aka co-regulation. A lot of time, this looks like codependence, but that's not what it is. This is the interactive process of the nervous system working together with someone else's to regulate emotional arousal and maintaining engagement, our attention, to help reduce stress or overload or to promote a sense of safety overall. By understanding that we are incapable of perceiving ourselves and incapable of perceiving others, this has a lot of implications. And we require external nervous system feedback. So, by being around a safe person, and for me, that's my partner now, they are constantly giving me information and feedback to let me know what's happening inside myself because I don't have that information alone. And that helps in so many ways. And by understanding that how much of an impact you have as an external nervous system feedback regulator will help put you in a much better position for your loved ones in understanding how to help.